So you're thinking about selling your home and ready to make your move. And probably you've been thinking about this for a while and you kind of put things off, kind of stalled out because of the interest rates. Let's be honest, at the end of 2022, when we start getting that upward tick in our mortgage interest rates, a lot of people put things on pause and it started cooling off for our housing market. I mean, I get it. And in 2023, not only do we have cooling off, we had a deep freeze. You probably thought to yourself, does it make sense for me to turn in a low interest rate for something much higher? And besides that, who's really going to buy my home with the interest rates the way they are? Who can afford a home with these high mortgage rates? But now things are shaping up and looking great. The things are starting to thaw out and people are out there buying homes because guess what? People have just determined they're going to live their lives, and they're living their lives in what you have, a home to sell. And you're probably excited because the headlines really are starting to make a turn to some more positive news. And you may have recently heard this.
We saw home sales rise in January 3.1%, and that's good news. You're still seeing those prices rise. That's because there's not a lot of inventory, but we're expecting that might shake out a little bit this spring. A couple of things to keep in mind. A well-priced home, those are going fast. There's pent-up demand for people to move. Maybe they've got kids they want to put in a certain school district. Maybe they have to move for a job and they've been sort of frozen out. I think you're going to see people trying to shop out there this year and try to get some traction in the housing market.
Well, in this video, I'm going to cover 7 areas that buyers can cancel the contract and wreck your move. I'm going to spend a little time going over some of these areas in our Texas residential resale contracts, because I know that you have your home priced right and you've made up in your mind you're ready to move. You even have your next place picked out. And that move could be contingent upon the sale of your current home. So it's really important that I point out some areas, some pitfalls, some things for you to be very aware and cautious of when you're in that negotiation stance with the buyer for your home. And trust me, I know that you're not preparing to study to get your license to sell real estate in Texas, but these are the things that I've experienced with my homeowners who are ready to sell their homes, and how sometimes we can be in a lock of wheels and get stuck. And every now and again, the buyer decides, I'm going to cancel the whole thing, and then it's a domino effect, and now you're stuck in your home. Now let's take a look at these areas that can wreck the sale of your home. Now let's take a look at our residential resale contract, which is 11 pages, but don't worry, we are not going over 11 pages together, but I do want to hit the highlights, the places to avoid, to be aware, to know, so that when you get an offer in your home, you are well aware of what's going on and the areas that you really want to focus and pay close attention to make sure you don't make a mistake that could cause your buyer to cancel the contract. Well, let's just start with what we call the property. And the property is going to include things that are permanently affixed, which will look like on your contract. It'll be improvements and accessory. And for most part, this is going to be pretty common sense. The part that may get a little tricky is the fact that with our contracts, over time, things change. So if you haven't sold a home in a while or purchased a home, you will be surprised at some of the things that are expected to stay. Now, I know you know that a stove and an oven, they stay. They're permanently affixed. But the things that you might not be quite sure about, because it could have changed since you last moved, are the mirrors. Yeah. If you have that beautiful entryway mirror, or you've done some great design with a mirror, that mirror is supposed to stay, including the mirrors in the bathroom. So if you have mirrors that you've purchased, you're attached to these mirrors, they really go perfectly, and you plan to take with you, then you need to go ahead and replace it now and save yourself so much frustration and so much headache, because Murphy would have it, Murphy's Law, that's the one item that buyer has determined they fall in love with and they want to have it when they move into your home. So let's avoid all that and just replace it. Now, some things that you might not be aware of, and you might think to yourself, wow, you gotta be kidding me. I gotta leave those too. Here are some things that I've heard homeowners describe as a surprise when it came to selling their homes. And just so you can see where they're located, here's where it's located on your contract that you've signed, so you're obligated to fulfill. Let's take a look at some of the things that you may not have thought about that are supposed to stay and convey. How about your mounts and brackets for your televisions and speakers? Yes, of course, take your television with you, but the mounts and brackets have to stay. And I cannot tell you how many times I've had to coach my sellers into saying, listen, I know you need brackets with this television that you're taking, but leave the brackets because they're mounted. Brackets aren't that expensive, and they certainly are not worth the price of not getting this deal moved forward over some brackets that you could replace easily. So those brackets, they're staying. That water softener that you had to have because you love it so much, you love how it just makes your skin feel so great, well, the buyer will love it too. So that water softener will also stay. And then if you are thinking that those beautiful custom drapes and curtains that match your custom linen is going to go with you, it's not. They're going to stay unless you replace them. So let's remove that objection, remove that opportunity for the buyer to fall in love with them, and go ahead and put something up that you really don't care whether they stay or go. And then here's something that trips some people up, although most people got more and more savvy, they get it, they understand that the swimming pool accessories and the equipment, they need to stay with the property. Even though you bought your next home that has a pool, you're going to get new equipment and new accessories. You're not going to take that one that you already have from your home. Oh yeah, all your controls, the remote controls to your garage door, to your entry gates, all of those will stay with the home. Even though you got them yourself, you paid for them, they're not going with you. We're going to leave those behind, as well as any software and hardware to operate those gates and your security systems. Now, there is a place in this contract that you signed, it's called exclusions. So if you just totally ignored all my advice to remove the items that you know you want to take, but it could be a little controversial because your buyer may want it to, well, this is where you can say you are going to remove these items, although in the contract it says that it should stay. Just, my advice is if you can remove it, just remove it. Why even bother agitating someone or you becoming frustrated by having the people see the very things that you know you're going to take? I know your media room is beautiful. You've got the state of the art, you've got the best equipment, and you plan to take that to your next space. Just switch it out for something that may not be quite state of the art, but your new buyer is still able to enjoy the experience of having the projector, the media room equipment, and all of that. Now, your media chairs, that's not bolted down. That's not something that has to stay, but you might throw it in just to sweeten the deal. And number two, the things that you want to be cautious about are the leases, specifically fixture leases. And this is going to cover that water softener that you have. That goes underneath fixture leases, and that security system. Yeah, that falls underneath this too, as well as those solar panels that you decided to purchase. So if you have one or more fixture leases, then there has to be an addendum regarding those leases. You have to have full disclosure. That buyer needs to know, what exactly am I paying for? Yes, you told me that I'm going to save a lot on my energy bills for these solar panels, but I don't know if I'm able to pay the balance of the installation and the monthly payment and everything else that goes along. So that buyer is going to have to know upfront all the terms of your lease agreement for those solar panels. And if they can't agree because they can't afford it, well, that will give them an opportunity to cancel the contract. But here's what my recommendation is for you, is just prepare yourself to pay off those leases if possible, because this is what I know, is that what was a great idea for you will be an extra expense for the buyer, and they are likely not able to or don't have the desire to pay for these items. Now, they may enjoy them, but they may not want to pay for them. So you should be prepared for that, because that could wreck the deal. Let's look at number three. Number three deals with your earnest money and your termination option. So your buyer probably purchased an option to terminate the contract, unrestricted right. They can cancel for whatever reason they feel like it. And you're going to notice that these contracts are very buyer protective. Your buyer has a lot of rights and options, whereas you as a seller, you really don't have very many. But I'm going to share one with you that you're going to get excited about, that at least you have the right and the option to do. But let's first talk about that option period. That buyer has purchased the option to terminate this contract. And this is the time where they're going to get their inspections done. Listen, they're going to come to your house possibly 2, 3, 4 times with different contractors, different inspectors to your home. So don't be agitated or disturbed. They have the right to do that. But keep in mind, this is also the time that they can cancel or terminate because you can't come to terms with repairs. Now, that's their right. They can do it. But here is where you can have some power if, for whatever reason, your buyer did not turn in the earnest money to the title company in a timely manner. If that happens, then you can actually terminate the contract because you kind of feel like this buyer's a little wiry anyway, and you kind of regret you signed the contract and you've got other options out there. Maybe you have a backup offer or something, and you're pretty frustrated with them and you're ready to be done with whatever reason. Well, if they have not turned in that earnest money, then you, as the seller, can terminate the contract. Now let's talk about number 4. And number 4, our good old HOA. The mandatory addendum is this home situated in a property owners association. And it's funny, the HOA, you either love it or you hate it. But let's say, for example, you hate your HOA and you refuse to pay your dues, and you're like, I'm not paying it, don't like them, don't need them. Well, guess what? Now you are. When you get ready to sell your home, they're coming to collect, or you will have a lien. They have the right to put a lien on your home. Well, that's the easy part, because you know you're responsible for that payment. But what you may not be aware of, because HOAs, they can change their rules, especially when it comes to resale certificates. There could be a fee for your buyer to enter into the HOA. So there are a lot of moving parts with the HOA. And the one thing that you're going to provide, according to the contract, is subdivision information. And this can get hairy. Let's take a look. If your home is in a property owners association, there's going to be an addenda to the contract that goes over you providing subdivision information. Now, the buyer can provide it. There is a provision, there is a box for that, but I'm just going to give you some more advice. You should pay for this. You should provide it. This is why, because if you provide it, you have a little bit more control of their ability to get out of the contract. Now, can they get out of it? Yes. There's a way to get out of any type of agreement. But what I want you to pay attention to is that it says, number 1, within a certain number of days. Let's say a certain number of days is 10. So within 10 days, you are going to make sure that that subdivision, your HOA, provides subdivision information to your buyer. They have 3 days after they get the subdivision information to decide whether or not they're going to continue with this contract. But if they don't get it, the buyer can still back out. But if they don't get it at all, they can terminate this deal, and the money, the earnest money, will go back to them. And you want to be sure that the first box is checked, because the second box really gives them a lot of power to terminate quicker than the first. The next really important part, number 5, is your property condition. And I know that you've got your utilities, you kept those on, even if the home is vacant, because that is part of the condition of the contract. The other thing I want you to really make sure of is when you receive your offer, that the seller's disclosures have been sent over to the buyer. I know you did it. I know you filled out the seller's disclosure, but if you get an offer and the box number 2 has been checked, and let's say they filled in 3 days because they said, hey, I never got the seller's disclosure, I would just stop right there and say, hey, my realtor, what do you mean they don't have the seller's disclosure? They have to have the seller's disclosure, because if they don't receive the seller's disclosure, then you have to provide that seller's disclosure to them. And if they say, I've not gotten this disclosure and I'm going to give you 3 days to get it to me, let me tell you, this is where it's going to be a huge pitfall for you. This is where you want to lean in and really pay attention. It says that if the seller delivers a notice, you've agreed to it, so you're going to have it delivered within 3 days. Buyer may terminate this contract for any reason within 7 days after the buyer receives a notice or prior to closing, whichever comes first. So you definitely don't want that box checked, because what you've done is given them more option days. Remember, they only had a few days. Maybe they only had 3 or 4 option days at the beginning. But because they did not get the seller's disclosure, now they've got an additional 7 days, and they can terminate even up to the day prior to closing. In addition to the seller's disclosure being really important, there's another important provision in this part, and they're all important. But one thing that I know people get tripped up on sometimes is the completion of repairs and treatment. And you have to have them done prior to closing. And you would think that is a no-brainer. Of course, if there's repairs, you have to do them before they close. But there are some occasions or some lack of understanding that some people experience, and they don't have the repairs done. Maybe for whatever reason, the contractor could not have the material ordered in time for the closing to take place by the close date. Well, your buyer can extend the closing date up to 5 days if necessary to get those repairs and those treatments completed. So I don't know that you want to extend any days, because every day that you extend is a day that the buyer can terminate or the buyer can cancel the contract. So we always like to keep things moving expeditiously. Okay, and number 6, now this one's going to have you scratching your chin and your head, wondering, are you serious? Comment and let me know what you think about this. And this is possession. Some sellers, for whatever reason, they worked something out, they felt benevolent, and they decided to allow the buyers to move in early. And you will hear all kinds of sad stories about why they need to move in early. But my advice to you is absolutely not. For one, it can change the terms of your insurance policy on your home. 2, think about it. If you allow your buyer to move in before closing, they can find all kinds of things wrong with the home. It is absolutely not worth you allowing somebody to move in. And honestly, no matter how the story is spun, I can't imagine a legitimate reason why you will allow somebody to move in your home before it closes. Here's a story. Not only did the seller allow the buyer to move in, the seller allowed the buyer to do improvements in the home. They started remodeling. That is so bizarre to me. Well, guess what? The loan didn't go through. The buyers could not purchase. They've already started working on a home, tearing up the home. And now the seller has to get them out of their home. And now the seller has to finish these improvements that the buyer wanted to make, not the seller. And that's an additional expense. There's a delay because the projects have to be finished at this point. And now we have an issue with fighting the market. Is your home now as valuable as it was when we first got it under contract? All right, moral of the story, however benevolent you feel, control your compassion and say no. Number 7 is casualty of loss. And this may seem like a lot of common sense to you, but it happens and we can have a problem. All right, you're excited about your home being under contract and you're ready to move. In fact, you might move a few days before the closing. So you disconnect your refrigerator, and some reason the refrigerator line is not tapped off. There's a slow drip. Your buyer comes in for their final walkthrough and your beautifully imported wood floors are ruined, water damage. I've had this happen, and I had the seller so incensed and did not want to make the repairs. My response is, Mr. Seller, this is still your home. There is damage to the property. Your home has to look in the same condition in which your buyer placed your home under contract. This will be the time to call your insurance and have them make the repairs. That can delay closing. So be very, very careful and just recognize that casualty of loss is a very real issue that people may have to go through, and I want to save you the aggravation of having to go through that yourself. And this is how it looks on your contract. Now, those are the ways that a buyer can cancel the contract. Now, here's a way you can have a contract canceled. And that's not really being the rightful owner or having the permission to sell the home. And as bizarre as that may sound, it does happen. Now, you may have power of attorney, but if there is a death, now we need the executor to make the decision regarding the home that your mom, your dad, your relative has passed away and they have left. And if we have to probate it, that can delay quite a bit. And now the title company can do affidavit of heirship, which hopefully details everyone who has the right or a claim to the property, because this is what you don't want to happen. You're under contract, the property is going to closing, and you're ready to be relieved of this home. And hopefully you got some equity there, and you've got some money that you've gotten from the sale, from the proceeds. And out of nowhere, someone shows up and they say they have a valid claim to this property, and they did not agree to have the home sold. And they certainly didn't agree to have it sold at that price. Now that can be a showstopper. So if there is a situation where you've inherited a home, a parent or whomever has passed away, just make sure you've done your due diligence before you list your property so that there's no hiccups that you've caused that may cause a delay of the contract. And frankly, if a buyer has put your home under contract and it's a long delay, they may not be able to stick with it. I mean, that is, I would guess, a way for them to cancel the contract. Hi, I'm Tracy Sorrell with the DFW Life, and I help people just like you sell their homes in and around our Dallas-Fort Worth metroplex. And I know that selling your home, you have your hopes, your dreams, your aspiration. You already have a plan for where you want to go. You've already picked out the home, the city, whether it's on the beach, wherever it is, and you're excited. And the last thing you want to prepare yourself for is the possibility of your buyer backing out of a deal. So give me a call, reach out, comment below, let me know if you're thinking about making a move, selling your home, so I can help you navigate these waters of how to get your home sold and move to your next place, the place where you're going to create your new memories and call home.